If you did a bacteriological analysis of water, the results would be put on the DD 686. That's for bacteriological analysis of water. How often do you do a bacteriological analysis of water aboard ship? Every week you collect a minimum of how many samples? 4 samples. If you receive water from an approved source, it's got to be chlorinated too. 0.2 parts per million after a 30-minute contact time. If you receive water from an unapproved source or an area where amoebiasis or hepatitis is prevalent, it's got to be chlorinated too. 2.0 parts per million after a 30-minute contact time. Remember that everything is either 0.2 or 2 parts except what? Lister bag is 5 parts per million. What is the only chlorine used aboard ship? 70% calcium hypochlorite. What would you use to disinfect water in a canteen? Iodine tablets must be what color? Steel gray and not stuck together. If the water is clear, you would use how many tablets? You would use 1 tablet. If it was cloudy, you would use how many? 2 tablets. You put the tablet in the canteen, you put the lid on loosely, you would shake it for how long? 5 minutes. You tighten the cap, you let it set an additional 20. Total time for iodine is 25 minutes. If you disinfected water in a 5-gallon can, how many tablets? 20. Put the tablets in the 5-gallon can, swish it around for 5 minutes, and let it set an additional 20 minutes. Total time for iodine is 25 minutes. Remember that chlorine is a 30-minute contact time. What color nozzles on water hoses? Freshwater hoses have a blue nozzle. Water used for drinking aboard ship, potable water hoses, should be marked potable water every 10 feet. They should be kept in a vermin-proof locker, 12 to 18 inches off the deck. What's the only thing you can use seawater for in port? For firefighting. Water must be assumed to be polluted when ships in formation are how far apart? Less than 1,000 yards. What's the minimum amount of water per man per day for drinking and cooking? 2. 2 gallons, all purposes. 12 to 35 gallons. Where would you find water supply shore? What manual? The Preventive Medicine Manual, P5010. What chapter? 5. Water supply ashore is 5. Water supply afloat is 6. And the one that you probably get a lot of questions on in the Preventive Medicine Manual is food sanitation, which is chapter 1. What rodent likes meat and fish? The Norway rat, which is also known as what? The brown rat, not the roof rat. And what rodent likes fruits and vegetables? The black roof rat. How do you distinguish between the two? The tail. The tail on the black roof rat is longer than the body, whereas an Norway or brown rat's tail is not as long as the body. What's not a good rat bait? Cheese. What is a good rat bait? Peanut butter, bacon rind, and coconut. What is the best rodenticide for use by hospital corpsmen? Warfarin is the best. What rodenticide is only used outdoors to destroy rodents in their burrows? Calcium cyanide is only used outdoors to destroy rodents in their burrows. What rodenticide requires VMET approval? Sodium monofluoroacetate, which is also known as 1080. And you need BUMET approval because there is no known antidote. What are the 4 international quarantinable diseases? Spikes, plague, smallpox, yellow fever, and cholera. What diseases contact walking barefoot in water with the infective snail? Schistosomiasis. What's the most common disease transmitted to man by mites? Scrubtitis, which is also known as Tsutsugamuchi. That's a Japanese word. What is contact with walking barefoot in water in infected soil? You walk barefoot in soil, you could get hookworm. What drug is a scabicide and also an antipyretic? Urax, which is also known as protomatin percentage, 10%. What drug is a scabicide and also a pediculicide? Quail, which is also known as lindane percentage, 1%. What is another name for undecylenic acid ointment? Undecylenic acid ointment is also known as Desonex, and it is used as a fungicide. The book says that hospital corpsmen on independent duty should not give penicillin, tetracycline, oxytetracycline, but will not give what antibiotic? Chloramphenicol, which is also known as chloromycetin, because it causes a blood dyscrasia and you have to do blood work before you can use it. But they may turn around and ask you what drug is a specific for typhoid fever or rickettsia disease, and that is chloramphenicol chloromycetin. Okay, let's go ahead and finish up what we did yesterday. What number we get to? What form discharge certificate may only be given by an approved general or special court-martial? A VCD, which is a D259N. 794 is under other than honorable conditions. 257N is general, and 256N is honorable. Remember, a dishonorable discharge is a DD260N. The Officer Distribution Control Report, ODCR, is prepared at NMPC. How often? Every month. The EDVR, the Enlisted Distribution Verification Report, is prepared by FMAC. How often? Every month. EDVR is divided into how many sections? 12 sections. What's the alpha listing? Section 3. The Diary Message Reporting System, DMRS, submission consists of how many distinct parts? 2 parts, the subject and the body. Didn't we get further than this yesterday? I must have got further with the other guys, huh? The personnel diary is a chronological record of personnel action attached to a naval activity for duty or temporary duty. Its purpose is to provide current accounting information to be used in conjunction with OCR document input in preparation of management reports throughout the Navy to MATIS, Manpower and Personnel Training Information System. The personnel diary message is prepared on what form? DD 173/3. What are the first two digits of the appropriation symbol which identifies the Department of the Army? That's right. Navy is 17, State Department is 19, Air Force is 57, and the Department of Defense is 97. What type of inventory should be conducted if a random sampling inventory of a specific storeroom fails to meet the inventory accuracy rate of 90% when directed by the type commander as a result of a supply management inspection? Bulkhead to bulkhead. What type of inventory would involve the inventory of all fast and slow movers? Velocity. Remember, special material would be like classified item storerooms. What fund is the revolving fund used to finance commercial type activities such as the Navy shipyard and Navy industrial? What type of fund is involved in the shipment of household goods? Navy management. Which of the personnel listed below is not a special assistant to the commanding officer? The XO is not a special assistant. The comptroller is. The director of nursing service is. The public affairs officer is. The command master chief is. And the MARC coordinator is a special assistant to the CO. What does ViewMed Instruction 6022.3 indicate? It's the third instruction from ViewMed with the same SSIC. What did I tell you yesterday? That if you saw an instruction or a form that was 62, what would it pertain to? What's that? Preventive medicine. Remember I said 62 preventive medicine, 63 reporting forms. Remember that 6230.3 is the instruction on immunizations. 6320/18 is the Binnacle list. Remember, slashes are forms, points are instructions. Which of the below would be an example of an arbitrary subject of an instruction? That is considered a major subject classification group. That's like when I say, which of the 14 major subject classification groups pertains to medicine and dentistry? 6,000. That is considered primary. That is considered secondary. That is considered arbitrary. And only used locally is tertiary. (6224/1). No, I'm sorry. That is arbitrary. Tertiary is the slash. The answer is 6224/1. What type of appropriation generally covers the operation and maintenance expenses of the Navy? Annual. How is a continuing appropriation indicated? By an X. How about a multiple year? Multiple year would be like but an X is continuing. What's the status of an appropriation no longer available for disbursement? Lapse. That means that you can no longer spend money. But if it's expired, it's no longer available for incurring obligations, but remains available for disbursement to liquidate existing obligations. And know the difference. If it's expired, you can still spend. If it's elapsed, you can't. What appropriation symbol is used to identify all appropriations assigned to the Navy? 17. The authorized medical allowance list, the AMAL, is normally sufficient to supply the medical needs of the ship for how long? 12 months, 1 year. What handling code would be used for material that is corrosive or poisonous? B. What's G? G is normal refrigeration. What temperature should biologicals be kept at? 35.6 to 46.4, which is 2 to 8 degrees centigrade. What handling code should be used for biologicals that must be frozen for preservation? W, subject damage by freezing. F, potency period. P, inflammable. I, subject damage by deterioration, usually 36 months or less. D. What form should be used to requisition GSA contract items such as medical books and journals? A D1149. What would be used to requisition BUMED control items locally? A D1149. What would be used to requisition BUMED controlled items through the supply center? A 1348. How many numbers in the Navy stock number? 13. That's what I told one of the guys down in Pensacola. He's a lieutenant now. But he came down there for classes when he was a second class. And I told him, I said, there's 13 digits in the stock number. So he's taking the exam, and one of the questions is, how many numbers in the stock number? And he's sitting there racking his brain, and I don't know what he thought, if somebody's going to tell him what it was or not, but he raised his hand to go to the bathroom. Proctor came over and took him in the bathroom. He got in there, and he was doing his business, and he looked up, and there was a box of Kleenex. What's the max amount of money that's kept in the impress fund? $5,000, but usually it's only $1,000. How often is the impress fund reviewed to determine current needs? Quarterly. And another question he has concerning quarterly is they'll ask you how often the BUPERS manual was changed. There's changes to the BUPERS manual made every quarter. What is the quantity of material to be maintained on hand to sustain current operations only for 6 months? That's the stockage objective. I know that the max amount of material maintained on board a ship and on order to sustain current operation only for 9 months is a requisitioning objective. Which of below listed personnel would be responsible for conducting an informal survey? The department head. They don't have formal, informal surveys anymore, but hell, you never know, they may ask you something on a test. Who is not permitted to serve on a formal survey board? That's right, he's got to be 11 or higher. Buildings and improvements would be considered plant property class 2. Remember, first you got to have land is plant property class 1. On the land you're going to put buildings and improvements is plant property class 2. Plant property class 3 is equipment other than industrial, such as an ambulance. And class 4 is industrial production equipment. How often is plant property inventoried? Every 3 years. What part of the prescription, which is a DD 1289, gives the directions to the compounder? The subscription. Remember, with the prescription, you got 4 parts. You got superscription, which is the RX. You got the inscription, is a list of drugs to be used and their amounts. You got the subscription, which is the directions to the compounder, directions to the pharmacist. And you got the signa or signature, which is the directions to the patient. Prescription should be kept on file for how long? 2 years, the same as what? Do what? Evals has changed, though. What else? How about the water test log? Deceit and affairs reports are kept 2 years, and the water test log is kept for 2 years. What schedule of drugs should be numbered consecutively preceded by the letter N and filed separately? 2 and 3. Alcohol should be preceded by the letter A and filed separately. The medical battalion, the FMF, consists of how many companies? 7 companies. Okay. The 7 companies in medical battalion consist of H&S, 2 shock and surgical, and 4 collecting and clearing. How many companies in dental battalion? 4. What's the first responsibility of medical support to the Fleet Marine Force? Number 1 is preventive medicine. Number 2 is care of the sick and injured. What principle is used to provide medical support to the sick, injured, and wounded Marine at the right time and place? Conformity. Which of below is not true concerning the battalion medical section H&S company? That's right. The assistant battalion surgeon is the one that runs the battalion aid station, not the battalion surgeon. He is a special assistant to the commanding or to the battalion commander. But know that there are 11 hospital corpsmen in a rifle company. Know that there are 65 hospital corpsmen assigned to H&S company. How many stretcher bearers assigned to an infantry battalion? 24. How many surgical support platoons, general surgeon and anesthesiologist, and 15 corpsmen provided for each battalion? 2. The medical company is structured by personnel. Or scratch that question, because there's no longer a medical company. You've got 4 collecting and clearing and 2 shock and surgical. There's no more medical company. What type of casualty receiving ship has the medical capability of providing only 90 beds? An LPD. What are the 3 primary ships for MMARC? Who was telling me this morning that they had a little thing on it, keeping it in order? The LHD, the LHA, and the P-H. D-A-H. Duh. That's a good thing, though. You take it and say, huh, how many is that? Duh. What classification of casualties require medical officers spend a great deal of their time with? Group 3, which is classified as yellow. 1 is white, 2 is green, 4 is red. White is classified as minimal. Yellow is immediate. Green is delayed, and red is expected. Casualties in the urgent classification must be evacuated within how many hours to save life or limb? 2 hours. And casualties in the priority category must be evacuated within 4 hours to keep the condition from becoming urgent. Yes. Okay. That's no good either, because there's no more hospital company. During amphibious operations, who is responsible for entering of the medical evacuees into the medical regulating system? The commander of the amphibious task force. A mount-out block is designed to support 3,000 people for how many days? 30 days. What's the nautical mile radius of an evacuation helicopter? 100 miles. How about a KC-130? 750. What publication establishes policies for operating and managing afloat supply departments and activities? NAVSUP P485. What's the Decedent Affairs Manual? NAVMEDCOM Review Med Instruction 5360.1. Who's responsible for the Decedent Affairs Program? UMAD. Who is responsible for the Casualty Assistance Calls Program? UPERS. What program is related to but not part of the Decedent Affairs Program? The Casualty Assistance Calls Program. What is only activated by Congress? Return of remains. What is only activated in time of war disaster? Phrase registration. The commanding officer's got to write a letter of condolence within 48 hours. The Casualty Assistance Calls officer's got to make a call within 24 hours between 06 and 2200. Remains to be buried at sea should be how far from the nearest land? 3 miles, the same as what? Dumping trash and garbage. That's a hell of a thing to compare it to, but you gotta remember that the casket should be weighted to 300 pounds. How many holes? 22-inch holes. How many bands minimum? 5 minimum, preferably 6 3/4-inch bands. And remember that when you put it in the water, if it doesn't sink, you don't call out the Marine Guard, because they did that once, and it sunk. Remember that government air is not authorized within CONUS, only overseas. Remember that if a body is coming from the overseas area, that escort is not responsible for the body as long as it is aboard the MAC aircraft. The MAC commander is responsible, but if it's commercial, he is. What's the max allowable stopover time for an escort? 72 hours. What if I was called back for escort duty? How would I be treated? As a civilian. To minimize cellular deterioration, remains should be refrigerated at what temperature? 36 to 40 degrees Fahrenheit, which is 2.2 to 4.4 centigrade. Unless specifically requested by the next of kin, remains will not be shipped or arrive at a destination on Thanksgiving, 22 to 26 December, and New Year's Day. Who's responsible for headstones and markers? The VA. Who's responsible for Arlington National Cemetery? The Department of the Army. How many types of cemeteries? 3 types: open, active, closed, inactive. New, they're planned, but they're not open yet. And what type of control does VUMET exercise over them? Technical control. Okay, Arlington comes under the Department of the Army. What do the other national cemeteries come under? The Director, Memorial Affairs Division, VANDC. If a person dies overseas, you ship them to the States. What form would be shipped with them? The DD 2064, which is a certificate of death overseas. How many copies? 3, along with 2 copies of the DD 565, which is a statement of recognition from all overseas areas except Guam. You're going to use. You're going to use 3 copies of the civil death certificate, along with 2 copies of the DD 565, the statement of recognition. Where does the original 2064 or civil death certificate go? In the health record. What is the form that the casualty assistance calls officer gives to the next of kin to fill out in case they spend any of their money? A DD 1375, which is a request for interment expenses. Remember, anything that they spend, they can get certain things back, but they have to submit that claim within 2 years. How many copies? 5 copies. Remember that if the Navy wants to do an autopsy, they can do it. They're supposed to have permission, but remember, if you have a death and you have who die, would you definitely do an autopsy? Air crewman. An officer assigned to coordinate the seat in the first program is preferably a member of what corps? The MSC. Remember, the MSC officer, the seat and affairs officer in the hospital, is responsible to inspect the body and to expedite transportation. Who's responsible for notifying the next of kin if a person dies overseas, the next of kin is overseas? CO. If a person dies at sea, you PERS. If a person dies overseas, next of kin is in the States. You PERS, remember, depending on where they are and where the person died. What's the ditty on the service record? Re-enlist every candidate that has understood court evaluation procedures right after reading DD 214. Nat PERS 1070/601 is the re-enlistment contract. If a person re-enlists within 24 hours after they get discharged, what is the document that establishes a legal relationship between the person and the government on enlistment? The DD Form 4. Now remember, if that person gets out of the Navy, stays out longer than 24 hours, they come back in, they would come back in with a DD Form 4. Remember, the DD Form 4 and the NAPERS 1070/601 is the page 1. 2. Record of emergency data. How many parts? 2 parts. First part is dependents' allowances. Second part is people to be notified in the case of an emergency or civilian insurance companies, or AN. .603, enlisted classification record. Remember, this lists any civilian schooling, any hobbies, interests, your basic battery scores. Remember that that form can't be altered unless you have approval from NMPC. .604, Navy Occupation Training and Awards History. Any education you've achieved since you've been in the Navy, be it college, correspondence courses, service schools, PARs, anything you do to qualify for advancement, awards, anytime you made rank or got busted, primary and secondary NECs would be indicated on the page 4. Five, history of assignments is a chronological listing of all ships or stations or hospitalization the person had since they've been in the Navy. The 605 in the service record is comparable to what form in the health record? The NAVMED 6150/4, which is the abstract of service and medical history. Remember the big thing on the page 5. If a person re-enlists and they get a re-enlistment bonus, the dispersing officer must sign the page 5 saying how much re-enlistment bonus a person got. Six, record of UA of more than 24 hours. So if a person's UA for less than 24 hours and goes to mast, it would be included on the page 13. Seven, court memorandum. If a person is found guilty by a court-martial and it's approved by the convening authority or anything that affected the person's pay, if that guy that was UA for less than 24 hours and went to captain's mast and he got busted or fined, you got to make a page 7. No 8. 9. Enlisted performance evaluation. What must be contained on the page 9? A recommendation for advancement. Remember, your traits are averaged, and at the end of your 4-year enlistment, you must have an overall average of 2.7. Except in military bearing, you have to have an average of 3.0 in order to get an honorable discharge. What is an annual evaluation? Symbol. P. What is a transfer? T. What is a special? S. What is meritorious or massed? M. .610. Record of personnel actions. Anytime you make rate or get busted, if you're a foreign national, you become a U.S. citizen, or if you draw pro pay, you would have a page 10. .11. Record of Navy Reserve. Remember, if you've been on active duty, you've never been in the reserves, you wouldn't have a page 11. Remember that reserves retire sooner if they do more correspondence courses, so they get so many points for doing correspondence courses, and it would be indicated on the page 11. No 12, but what did I say in the class yesterday? What form is a NAVComp/NAVPERS form? The form that is a NAVComp/NAVPERS form is the STO, the Standard Transfer Order. 613. Administrative remarks is a catch-all. Remember, if you have a question on your exam, you have no earthly idea where to put it, and the page 13's there, take it. But don't put it down if they got another answer that you think might be right. I had a girl in Pensacola last time. I went through the little thing about how to take the test and everything, and I say how the numbers are supposed to be close together. And I said, if it was the old military leadership test where you had 25 ones, 25 twos, 25 threes, and 25 fours, it's going to come out even. But you've got 150 questions, and there's no way it can come out even. So you're going to have like 37 ones, 37 twos, 38 threes, and 38 fours, but it's going to be close. So I say, go through, take your test, mark the ones you know. Then you go back to the ones that you can eliminate choices. And then you're going to have so many you have no earthly idea what the hell the answer is. And then you count your totals. And you got to play the game. Well, she played the game. She erased answers and made them all come out even. She missed third class by 2 points. But I can't believe anybody is that dumb. Remember, the page 13 is a catch-all. Persons issued a 45, their counsel concerning derogatory performance, their counsel concerning drugs or alcohol. They've given a meritorious mass. They are involuntarily extended. If they're involuntarily extended, they would have a page 13 made. If they voluntarily extended, they would have a NAVPERS 1070/621, which is, that is the active duty extension. That is also known as the 1 alpha. And if they were reserve, they would have a NAVPERS 1070/621, or 22, which is a reserve extension. Remember what I said about that senior chief? He got out of the Navy after 25 years. He is not discharged. He's still got 5 years to go before he's discharged. So any time during those 5 years, he could be called back in. So if he got recalled, he would sign the 622. Yes?
So most people who got early retirement, 15 years, they have 15 years?
They're not retired until they got 30 years now. So don't retire at 15. Record of naval or discharge from the Navy Reserve. And probably the most important piece of paper you got in your service record is the DD-214. That's the one that you're going to take to the VA to determine how much money you're going to get. Remember what I said, when a person gets out of the Navy, you would give them the 3, the 4, the 5, and the DD-214. And then you would kick yourself in the ass because when they come back in, you can't find them. Remember when a person transfers from sea to shore, shore to sea, or whatever, you'd make an entry on the 5, the 9, because you're doing an evaluation, and the 13. Let's take a break. When was the first large-scale use of chemical agents first employed? WW1. Where? Ypres, Belgium. How many casualties resulted? 5,000. What gas did they use? Chlorine. Which below is not true concerning the use of chemical and biological agents? Biological agents are more suited for their tactical use. Yeah, strategic use. Chemical agents are more suited for their tactical use. What type of material is more resistant to nerve gas? Polyester and butyl rubber is more resistant. What's the maximum amount of atropine that may be given by non-medical people? 6 milligrams. How many milligrams each syringe? 2. Which of below is not true concerning blister agents? That's right. Mustard HD is more persistent and less volatile than nitrogen mustard HN. What's the most frequent complication from exposure to mustard nitrogen mustard? Bronchopneumonia. But if they die, they would die from massive edema or mechanical pulmonary obstruction. Which of the below is not true concerning the viscant leukocyte? That's right. Sodium sulfacetamide 30% may be used to combat eye infections after 24 hours. The symptoms of watering in the eyes, tightness in the chest, and later symptoms of rapid shallow breathing, painful cough, frothy sputum, cyanosis, clammy skin, rapid feeble pulse, and low blood pressure are symptoms of exposure to choking agents. Remember that symptoms from choking agents seldom last longer than 2 to 6 hours, but that's a hell of a long time. What chemical agent has the odor of new mown hay? Phosgene smells like new mowed hay or freshly cut grass. Hydrosonic acid, which is a blood agent, smells like almonds. Think of somebody that dies in a gas chamber. The last smell that they smell is almond. Mustard gas smells like, thanks sir. Mustard smells like garlic or horseradish. And leukocyte smells like geraniums. The required dose of sodium thiosulfate, 100 to 200 milligrams per kilogram IV over a 10-minute period, is necessary after the initial treatment if exposed to cyanide chloride, CK, which is a blood agent. Remember that sodium thiosulfate is used as an adjunct to amyl nitrite. What is used as an adjunct to atropine? For nerve agent, 2-PAM chloride. Know that the ability for a chemical agent to remain in the atmosphere is called persistency. Know that a bonus effect in biological warfare is how it spreads. Communicability is a bonus effect. The symptoms of a strong pepper-like irritation in the upper respiratory tract, irritation in the eyes or lacrimation, violent, uncontrollable sneezing, coughing, nausea, vomiting, and a feeling of malaise are symptoms of exposure to all of them, which are vomiting agents, also known as sternutators. Remember, the only one that you can probably pronounce is Adamsite, which is DM. It ain't written there, but that's what Adamsite is. That's the one that's normally on the test. Which of the below is not true concerning lacrimators? Symptoms following severe exposure seldom last longer than 12, or 2 hours, not 12 hours. Know that choice B, Those two big long words, that is CS. And know that CS is more potent than that other long word, which is CN. People that are watching this tape ought to get a hell of a lot out of that. But I wouldn't even try to pronounce some of those things. I had some of the guys down in Pensacola, they were DRCing and all this stuff, you know. I said, yeah, okay. What specific therapy for a victim exposed to a psychochemical agent? There ain't none. But what would you do? You would keep them from hurting themselves or anybody else by putting them in a padded cell, put them in a straitjacket, but there's no specific therapy. But know the third choice. Know that physiostigmine is used after 4 hours. And what's the only standard psychochemical agent used by the United States? BZ. Flash blindness from a nuclear explosion only persists for how long? 20 to 30 minutes. What type of clothing is best suited for protection during a nuclear explosion? Loose-fitting, light-colored wool. And the best place to be, if you must be in an area where there's a nuclear attack, is in the basement of a reinforced concrete building. And if you're caught out in the open, drop to a prone position and cover your mouth with a hanky. Dislocate your neck by kissing your ass goodbye. I had to say it. But if you're caught out in the open, cover your mouth and nose with a hanky. I'm liable to get in trouble for saying that. What type of radiation has the greatest penetrating power? Gamma rays. What type of radiation does the most damage if it gets into the body? Okay, remember that alpha particles can be stopped by a piece of paper. But if they get into the body through respiration or through a cut, then they do the most damage. If a person is suffering from radiation overdose, they should be placed on antibiotic therapy. What dose? Triple the recommended dose, along with an antifungal antibiotic such as a grispeg, griseofulvin. What type of diet should a radiation casualty be placed on? A bland non-residue, but in your diet therapy in the one in chief, it says radiation casualties should receive high-protein diets. Huh? Well, the bland non-residues in the 3 and 2. If you got it in diet therapy, you're going to put high protein. It depends on where they're asking you. Huh? Well, they wouldn't put both of them on there. But that's some of the confusing things that, just like in AMP this morning, it said that normal WBC is 6,000 to 8,000. That's what the AMP section says, but the lab section says 4,000 to 11,000. So, know that with radiation, if a person has a burn, it's treated just like any burn once they've been decontaminated. They may ask you how you would protect an uncontaminated cut during decontamination, and the answer is impermeable tape. They might ask you how you would remove dry contamination, and the answer they want is just plain tape. The shock wave accompanying an underwater burst will produce mechanical injuries from flying typewriters and that kind of stuff. What type of burst creates more burn casualties? An air burst. What type of burst creates more burns of the eyes? A night air burst. Okay, don't be writing this stuff down, because we also got a ditty on this that I don't know if they passed it out yet or not, but I got all this stuff written down too. Okay, there's 7 chemical agents: nerve, blood, choking, blister, vomiting, tear, and psychochemical. Nobody cares but very thoughtful people. A nerve agent is also known as an anticholinesterase agent. There are two enzymes in the body required for normal nervous stimulation: acetylcholine and cholinesterase. It is an anticholinesterase agent, so if somebody's exposed to a nerve agent, it wipes out cholinesterase. It causes an accumulation of acetylcholine. If a person dies from exposure to a nerve agent, they die from overstimulation. So when you give the atropine, all it does is block acetylcholine until cholinesterase can be regenerated, and you have equal amounts in the body again. Okay, a person's exposed to a nerve agent. If it's the vapor, the first symptom is going to be pinpoint pupils, tightness in the chest, muscle jerking and twitching, and salivation. They're going to be drooling and slobbering. If they are exposed to the liquid on the skin, the first symptom is going to be muscle jerking and twitching, pinpoint pupils, tightness in the chest, muscle jerking and twitching, and salivation. What are you going to give them? You're going to give them atropine. 2 milligrams in each syringe. Non-medical people may give 3 syringes. Medical people would give atropine every 10 to 15 minutes until what appeared. Atropinization and signs of atropinization are? That's right. Remember, the person is drooling and slobbering, so signs of atropinization are the mouth dries up and the person develops tachycardia. There are 2 types of nerve agents. The ones discovered by the Germans are the G agents. GA is taboon. GB is sarin, and GD is Solman. And the only nerve agent that's used by the United States is VX. There's no name, just VX. Once the nerve gas casualty has gotten the medical aid, the drug that's used as an adjunct to atropine is 2-cam chloride. Next, a blood agent is also known as a systemic poison. A blood agent interferes with oxygen supply to the brain and the vital organs. You need a drug that's used for immediate vasodilation. In the pharmacy and toxicology section of your test, they may ask you what drug is used for immediate vasodilation. Amyl nitrite. In the first aid section of your test, they may ask you what drug would be given to somebody who just got a circumcision. Amyl nitrite. It works. Two blood agents listed in the book. AC is hydrocyanic acid. Hydrocyanic acid smells like almonds. And CK is cyanogen chloride. Okay, you're going to use amyl nitrite for a blood agent casualty. Approach 2 ampules, place under the mask. Repeat every few minutes until you use the max of 8 ampules. The person is either going to die quick or they're going to get well quick. Now your little ampules you got for ammonia, they're white. Amyl nitrite are just like that, except they're yellow. Once the blood gas casualty has gotten the medical aid, the drug is used as an adjunct to amyl nitrite is sodium thiosulfate IV. Choking agent is also known as a lung irritant. They ask on the exam all the time, what agent would a person have been exposed to if they are referred to as a dry land drowning? Choking agent. Two choking agents are CG. CG is phosgene. Phosgene smells like new mowed hay or freshly cut grass. CL is chlorine. Chlorine was first used in Ypres, Belgium, 1915. WW1, 5,000 casualties resulted, and 1/3 of all U.S. casualties during the First World War were due to chemical agents. There is no specific treatment. All you can do is treat them symptomatically once you get them to medical aid. No specific treatment for somebody exposed to a choking agent. A blister agent is also known as a vescant. If a person is exposed to a blister agent, know that once redness appears, decontamination is useless. And if the eyes are affected, they're going to have a gritty feeling in the eyes, like they've got sand in the eyes. HN is mustard. Mustard smells like garlic or horseradish. HN is nitrogen mustard. L is suicide. What's the primary difference between somebody who's exposed to mustard, nitrogen mustard, in comparison to lewisite? Symptoms. Mustard, nitrogen mustard. Symptoms are delayed in appearing, don't normally appear for 12 hours, may be delayed up to 48. And normally the first sign is reddening of the skin. Lewisite, as soon as you come in contact with lewisite, you're going to have a hell of a lot of pain. So lewisite is pain on contact. What's lewisite smell like? Geraniums. What are you going to do for lewisite casualty? British anti-lewisite, Val. What's another name for it? Dimer-caparol. And another blister agent that they ask on all the time is CX, which is phosgene oxime. They may ask you what you would use to treat somebody exposed to CX or phosgene oxime, and the answer is sodium bicarbonate dressings. Know that those four are used primarily to kill, and the next three are used in training and riot control. Remember, you bring your V down. A vomiting agent is also known as a sternutator. And the three vomiting agents are DM, which is Adamsite, DA, and DC. And you can see how to pronounce them from your study guide. Don't even look at me. A question they ask all the time on a vomiting agent is, how are you going to help to get rid of the symptoms? And the answer they want is, vigorous work and exercise will help to get rid of the symptoms. Tear agent is also known as a lacrimator. And the two tear agents are CS and CN. Remember that CS is more potent than CN. They may ask you if you have the tear agent on your skin, how you would help to get rid of it. The answer they want is to face the wind. The wind will evaporate it. Remember, the most important piece of gear you can have in an MBC attack is the protective mask. Psychochemical agent, also known as a hallucinogen, a drug that alters body thought. PSP, LSD, something that screws your mind up. But the only standard psychochemical agent used by the United States is BZ. And that's also known as 3-hyphen, I always put down 3-hyphen Quin, because if they got it on there, it's just going to be 3-hyphen Quin and then whatever, but it's a long word too. But remember, if a person is exposed to a psychochemical agent, there's no specific treatment. The only thing you can do is keep him from hurting himself or anybody else, put him in a padded cell, put him in a straitjacket. But there's no specific treatment. And remember, the drug that you use after 4 hours is physiostigmine. What's the minimum number of decon stations on a ship? 2 is the minimum number. Okay, get out your OCR. But I'm telling you, the stuff that I'm putting on the board, and like I said, they are, it's on a piece of paper, so all you got to do is look at it. Try to memorize that stuff, because if you can separate it, it's a hell of a lot easier to sit there and refer to that rather than sit there and try to rack your brain of what's what. It's really easy when you learn it, but you need to practice writing it out. All OCR documents should be stored in a clean and dry room. Remember, any document that's been bent, folded, any way, shape, or form should be thrown away. What's the first thing you do when the OCR documents are initially placed in a typewriter? You type the word or line in the upper right-hand corner. You make an X on the block on the left-hand side. Make sure that they line up. Know that the computer is capable of reading 370 characters per second, 750 documents per hour. There are 2 principal computer sites for OCR. Pay is in Cleveland. Personnel is in D.C. Where would you find information on approved OCR equipment? In the second half of instruction, that's right. Which of the below would designate the letter 0 in the OCR character set of alpha letters? C is the right answer. And I've seen them on the exam just to see if you knew the difference between a 0 and the letter O. The 0 is a diamond. The O is like a block. And I've seen them ask, how would it be indicated on the OCR document if an enlisted person was, or an officer, a lieutenant, was prior enlisted? And the answer they wanted was 03E. But they had the diamond, and they had also the O. Which of the below would designate the number 1 in the OCR character set of numerals? D is the right answer. Which of the below abstract symbols indicates a character delete? The Chinese Christmas tree. There's 2 character deletes used by the Navy. The blob, which is indicated by choice B of question number 4, and the Chinese Christmas tree. Which of the abstract symbols indicates a block delete? The chair, which is C. Which of the below abstract symbols is not recognized by OCR readers in the Navy? The belt buckle, which is B. A is the blob, and C is the Chinese Christmas tree. The platinum bale roll should be cleaned to remove correctional material and or carbon that might get on the originals. How often? Every day. But know that the typefaces should be cleaned with a stiff brush and type cleaner every week. What's the main objective of instruction in optical character recognition? B is true because of A. What line delete is usually typed only at the end of the line where there is a space? The hook. Remember, if you screw up at the beginning of the sentence, usually the first 3 or 4 letters, you would use the elongated hyphen. But used at the end of the sentence is the hook. Which of the below listed form or forms can't be corrected by the line or the block delete? All of them. Because you can't use anything other than the character delete on service record forms. How can filling in of openings in such characters as 9 or R be corrected? Clean the type. The type arm is bent, and the serviceman must be called for. Character skew. On the flying capitals, they may ask you what is caused by erratic typing or platen not seated before typing began. Flying capitals. Which of the below is not a true statement concerning OCR documents? A max of 50 documents per transmittal except for payroll, not allotments. What's the system used by all armed services to maintain computerized leave and pay accounts, furnishes monthly leave and earning statements, and provides financial management reports to an MPC? JUMPS, which is a Joint Uniform Military Pay System. Remember that OCR documents are 2 types, NAV-PERS and NAV-COMP. Which of the below is not true concerning OCR nomenclature? Density is the degree of darkness of typed characters. Okay. All OCR data input documents shall be mailed daily by airmail. Remember that all OCR documents should be mailed in special envelopes that have a lot of padding so that they can't get bent. If a document that's been transmitted to an MPC or the Navy Finance Center is subsequently corrected or retyped, the corrected document is annotated in the middle of the bottom margin as a corrected copy with how many numerals indicated? 5 numerals. The first 2 are, or the first 3 are, the Julian date. And the other 2 are the transmittal number. You would start off with 01 to 99, and then you start over again. What group of non-scannable documents are sent to NMPC by administrative offices? 6. Remember that 1 through 4 go to the Navy Finance Center in Cleveland. 5 is scannable documents. They're processed by the machine and they go to NMPC. But 6 is non-scannable. They must be processed manually, but they also go to NMPC. Material and suspense files may be destroyed after how many days if no follow-up action is required? 60 days. Remember that all NAV-COMP forms go to the Navy Finance Center. Do all NAV-PERS forms go to the Navy Finance Center or to NAV-PERS? All NAV comp forms go to the Navy Finance Center. Do all NAV PERS forms go to NMPC? All except the NAV PERS 1070/602 goes to the Navy Finance Center, the Record of Emergency Data. Get out your lab. It's hot on hell in here. When you're doing a gram stain, what's referred to as the mordant, the Graham's iodine, those are the 4 ingredients for doing a gram stain. First, you would use the crystal violet. Okay, when you do a gram stain, you take the slide, you get the body discharge, you put it on there, and you smear it around about the size of a dime. You fix it by passing it through an open flame. You don't burn it. You don't allow carbon to build up. Then you take it to the sink. The first ingredient is the crystal violet. That is also known as the primary stain. They don't recommend that you use gentian or methyl violet because they contain impurities. You could use ammonium oxalate solution. You put the crystal violet on a stain. How long do you let it on? 1 minute. And then you flush it with tap water. What does it do? It colors everything in the stain dark blue. The second ingredient is the Graham's iodine. It is referred to as the mordant. What does it do? It hooks on to the crystal violet where it can't be washed off. How long do you let it on? 1 minute. And you flush it with tap water. The third ingredient is called the decolorizer, acetone alcohol. All you do is take your slide, tilt it up, take the acetone alcohol in a dropper bottle, and you squirt it on there until the purple or blue, dark blue color stops running. And all it does is wash the stain off the slide except for the gram positive. And the last ingredient is the saffron, which is also known as the counter stain. And the saffron counter stain colors all gram negative organisms with color pink. Remember that gram positive is purple and gram negative are pink. Remember that a smear that's positive for gonorrhea is reported as entering extracellular gram-negative diplococci morphologically resembling Neisseria gonorrhea. The causative agent is Neisseria gonorrhea. I'll get faster than that. I'm being slow. Remember that stain smears reveal 2 things, the morphology and the staining characteristics of the bacteria. What urine preservative may dissolve to produce false positives for albumin? Thymol. If they ask you which was the best urine preservative you would put, toluene is the best because it seldom dissolves to produce false positives for albumin. Remember that if you collect a urine sample, if you're not going to examine under the microscope right away, it's got to be kept in the refrigerator. And if you use a urine preservative, when you do run the sample, you got a pipette below the urine preservative. Because when you use the urine preservative, all you're doing is putting a thin layer of film on top to keep air from getting to it. When performing a finger puncture, wipe away the first drop to avoid dilution with tissue fluid. Where would you make the puncture with the hemolet on an infant? In the heel or the great toe. And remember that you would not squeeze. You squeeze, you get serum in there, and you have an inaccurate count. You've got to do it again. What part of the microscope controls the amount of light that reaches the condenser? The iris diaphragm. They may ask you, what is the most common microscope used in the Navy? The compound microscope. What objective should be used for detailed study of stained bacteria? Oil immersion. Know your objectives. Remember that normal WBC is thousands. Normal RBC is millions. So, the objective you would use for a WBC is low power. RBC is high dry. And detailed study of stained bacteria is oil immersion. What oil solvent should be used to remove dried oil from lenses? Xylol. What diluting fluid is used for doing an RBC? 0.85% sodium chloride, which is also known as normal saline. What is the diluting fluid for doing a WBC? Either acetic or hydrochloric acid. Once the blood and the diluting fluid is drawn into the pipette, in what direction and how long should it be shook? 3 minutes, not in the direction of the long axis. So if you got it in there, you don't go like this, you go like this. Not in the direction of the long axis. Okay, when you do a CBC, you do the RBC, the hematocrit, the hemoglobin, the WBC, and the differential. That is a CBC. If you're doing an RBC count, the pipette, the RBC pipette has a red pellet. You would draw the blood up to the 0.5 mark, and then you would use your normal saline, 0.85% sodium chloride. You would draw it up to the 101 mark. Shake it for 3 minutes, not in the direction of the long axis. If you do a WBC count, the white blood cell pipette has a white pellet. You would draw the blood up to the 0.5 mark, and then you would use either acetic or hydrochloric acid. You would draw it up to the 11 mark. Again, shake it for 3 minutes, not in the direction of the long axis. After the 4 fields are counted, when you're doing a white blood count, you'd multiply by 50. After the 5 fields are counted, when you're doing an RBC, you'd multiply by 10,000. What is normal WBC? No, same. WBC is the same in a man and a woman. WBC is 4 to 11,000. RBC in a man, 5.4 million plus or minus 0.8 million. In a woman, 4.8 million plus or minus 0.6 million. In a newborn, 5.1 million plus or minus 0.9 million. Remember that the RBC is lower in a woman than it is in a man. How many cells are there in the field below? That drawing is so damn old, it's not funny, but there might be 25 there. But I just put it on there to show you the rule for counting the cells. Remember, you count the cells that touch the lines on the top and the left, but you don't count the ones that touch the lines on the bottom and the right. You don't count the backward L. And if the cells vary by how many cells from the field containing the fewest to the field containing the most do you have an inaccurate count? 20 cells. Which of the following conditions indicate that the counting chamber is properly loaded? There's a thin, even film of fluid under the cover glass. What's the most accurate method of determining hemoglobin estimation? The photometer. But watch how the question's worded, because they may ask you what the most accurate means of determining blood volume is, and that is the microhematocrit method. The normal hematocrit for males is approximately 42 to 50%. Females is 40 to 48. Again, hematocrit in a woman is lower than it is in a man. Just like the RBC in a woman is lower than it is in a man. But I think they have something in Congress trying to get it even. Remember that a subnormal RBC indicates anemia. What is dyscrasia blood-forming tissue called by? Malfunctioning of the marrow and the lymph tissues. When you're doing a CBC, you're determining the number of red and white cells and how much blood. 1 cubic millimeter. Which of the following conditions are characterized by leukocytosis? Appendicitis. What is leukocytosis? Remember that the normal WBC is 4 to 11,000. Leukocytosis is an elevation above 11,000. Usually signs of an acute infection. Appendicitis, pneumonia, meningitis, emotional upset during labor. What is the term that's used to denote a WBC below 4,000? Leukopenia, a few conditions. Typhoid fever, anaphylactic shock, hepatitis. A continued shift to the left with a falling total right count indicates a breakdown of the body's defense mechanism and is a poor prognosis. What WBC increases in helminthic infections and allergic conditions? An eosinophil. They may not have helminthic, they may have parasitic. Parasites, worms, same thing. So watch how it's written. What's the largest of all normal WBCs? A monocyte is the largest. What stain is used in the lab for a differential? White stain. How many cells do you count? You count 100 cells. What's the most common cause of poor results of right stain? Incorrect time intervals. They may ask you, next to incorrect time intervals, what's the most common cause of poor results of right stain? And that is incorrect pH of the staining fluid. How many cells are counted when you're doing a differential? 100. What's the youngest form of neutrophil? A metamyelocyte, which is also known as a juvenile, progresses from there to a band, which is also known as a stab, progresses from there to a segmented 2, hypersegmented. What is another name for a neutrophil? It is also known as a phagocyte. You shouldn't have a problem remembering that. All right, let's knock it off today and we'll pick it up tomorrow.